The stars shimmered in the endless expanse of space, a canvas of twinkling lights that stretched far beyond the imagination's reach. For Robert, this view had become a familiar yet ever-fascinating companion on his countless journeys. A seasoned pilot and explorer, Robert had always felt more at home among the stars than on any planet's surface. The vastness of space, the thrill of the unknown, and the promise of discovery were what kept him going. But this mission, routine as it seemed, was about to become anything but ordinary. Robert's spacecraft, the Starlight Echo, cruised smoothly through the void, its polished hull reflecting the distant starlight. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, equipped with state-of-the-art technology and designed for deep space exploration. Robert sat in the cockpit, his hands gliding over the controls with practiced ease. The soft hum of the engines was a comforting sound, a reminder of the vessel's reliability. He glanced at the navigation console, a holographic map displaying the vast star systems he had charted on this journey. Everything was proceeding as planned until a sudden, jarring lurch broke the serene silence. The Starlight Echo shuddered violently and alarms blared throughout the cabin. Robert's heart raced as he quickly scanned the control panels. A cascade of red lights indicated a catastrophic systems failure. He had faced malfunctions before, but this was different. The ship's artificial intelligence, an entity with a calming, feminine voice, spoke in a tone tinged with urgency. Critical malfunction detected. Main thrusters offline. Immediate course correction required. Robert's fingers flew across the controls, attempting to stabilize the ship. His mind raced, calculating the odds of surviving an emergency landing on an unknown planet. The navigation system had detected a small, uncharted celestial body within reach. It was their only hope. With a deep breath, Robert engaged the auxiliary thrusters, directing the ship towards the planet's surface. The descent was a chaotic blur. The Starlight Echo plunged through the planet's atmosphere, the friction causing the hull to glow an intense orange. Robert gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain control as the ship hurtled towards the ground. The landscape below came into view, a vast, desolate expanse of rocky terrain, devoid of vegetation or any signs of life. The ship's sensors registered the harsh environment, extreme temperatures, toxic gases, and a thin atmosphere. It was a hostile world, unwelcoming and unforgiving. The Starlight Echo touched down with a bone-jarring thud, skidding across the rocky surface before finally coming to a halt. The impact sent a cloud of dust and debris into the air, settling slowly in the oppressive stillness. Robert exhaled a shaky breath, his hands trembling from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He quickly initiated the emergency protocols, shutting down the ship's systems and sealing the cabin. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of moments before. After a tense minute, Robert unbuckled his harness and stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. The cabin lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He activated the emergency power, and the dim interior lights stabilized, revealing the extent of the damage. The main control panels were cracked, and sparks occasionally sputtered from exposed wires. The situation was grim, but Robert's immediate concern was survival. He grabbed his exploration gear, a lightweight, durable suit designed for hostile environments, and donned it swiftly. The suit's helmet, equipped with a rebreather and a heads-up display, provided him with vital information about the planet's conditions. As the suit's systems came online, Robert checked the atmospheric readings. The air was toxic, filled with sulfurous gases that could easily asphyxiate an unprotected human. He made a mental note to conserve his suit's oxygen supply. With his helmet sealed, Robert approached the airlock. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the barren landscape beyond. He hesitated for a moment, taking in the alien vista. The sky was a murky gray, the sun a distant, cold orb barely penetrating the thick, clouded atmosphere. Jagged rock formations jutted out from the ground, casting long, ominous shadows. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, a sharp, acrid scent that stung even through his helmet's filters. As he stepped out onto the planet's surface, the ground crunched beneath his boots. The terrain was harsh and unyielding, a wasteland of sharp stones and brittle soil. Robert activated the suit's sensors, scanning the area for any signs of life or technology. The readings were faint but consistent. Something was emitting an energy signature not far from his position. His curiosity piqued, Robert set off towards the source. The journey was arduous. The landscape was a labyrinth of craggy outcroppings and treacherous ravines, requiring careful navigation. The suit's augmented vision helped him avoid the worst of the terrain, but the effort was exhausting. As he trudged forward, the energy readings grew stronger, and an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. The source was close, and whatever it wasn't natural. After what felt like hours, Robert finally reached the edge of a steep incline. Peering over the edge, he saw a hidden facility nestled within the rocky landscape. The building was massive, its dark, metallic structure contrasting sharply with the surrounding terrain. It was as if the facility had been carved out of the very rock, designed to blend in and avoid detection. The energy signature emanated from within, a pulsing beacon in the suit's sensors. Robert's heart raced as he surveyed the facility. It appeared abandoned, with no visible signs of life or activity. The main entrance was a massive reinforced door, slightly ajar. The place had an aura of desolation, as if it had been left to decay for years. Yet something about it felt wrong, an eerie stillness that set his nerves on edge. Determined to uncover the facility's secrets, Robert made his way down the incline and approached the entrance. The door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. The air inside was cool and stale, a stark contrast to the harsh environment outside. As he stepped into the shadows, the door creaked shut behind him, sealing him inside. The corridor was dimly lit, the walls lined with flickering lights. The floor was cold metal, and the air carried a faint, unpleasant odor. Robert activated his helmet's night vision, illuminating the path ahead. The facility was a labyrinth of hallways and chambers, each more foreboding than the last. The deeper he ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the walls themselves whispered secrets best left forgotten. As Robert continued his exploration, he came across rooms filled with strange machinery and equipment. The technology was advanced, far beyond anything he had seen before. Some of the machines hummed softly, indicating they were still operational. Others were silent, covered in dust and grime. It was clear that this place had been abandoned in haste, with no regard for what was left behind. The silence was broken only by the sound of his footsteps and the occasional creak of the facility settling. Robert's mind raced with questions. What was this place? Who built it? And for what purpose? The answers seemed just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of this enigmatic structure. He felt a growing sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that he was not alone. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed through the corridor, a distant, muffled cry. Robert froze, straining to listen. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. It was the sound of someone or something in distress. His heart pounded in his chest as he followed the noise, his mind racing with possibilities. Could it be survivors, or perhaps something more sinister? As he approached the source of the sound, the corridor opened into a large, dimly lit chamber. The sight that greeted him was both shocking and heart-wrenching. Rows of cells lined the walls, each one containing a figure huddled in the corner. The figures were women, alien women, their ethereal beauty marred by the marks of imprisonment and suffering. They were dressed in tattered garments, their eyes dull and lifeless. The air was thick with despair, a palpable sense of hopelessness that hung heavy in the room. Robert's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary facility, it was a prison, a place of torment and exploitation. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. These women were prisoners, held against their will, and he had stumbled upon their dark and hidden world. The faint cry that had led him here had come from one of them, a soft, pitiful whimper that spoke of unimaginable suffering. As he stood there, grappling with the enormity of what he had discovered, a sense of resolve began to take shape within him. He couldn't leave them here, trapped and alone in this forsaken place. He had to do something, anything, to help them. The thought of turning his back on these women, of leaving them to their fate, was unbearable. With newfound determination, Robert turned and made his way back down the corridor. He had to formulate a plan, gather information, and find a way to free these women from their prison. The descent had brought him to a dark and horrifying place, but it had also ignited a fire within him, a burning desire for justice, and a promise to himself that he would not rest until these women were free. As he retraced his steps, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger and challenges, but he was prepared to face them. The descent had been just the beginning, a prelude to a greater battle that lay ahead. And in the depths of this forsaken facility, amidst the shadows and sorrow, Robert found a new purpose, a mission that would change his life forever. The oppressive atmosphere of the hidden facility seemed to weigh down on Robert as he navigated the dimly lit corridors. Every step echoed ominously, each sound amplified by the eerie silence that surrounded him. The air was cold, almost sterile, yet tinged with a metallic scent that hinted at the facility's sinister purpose. Robert's mind raced, grappling with the shocking sight of the alien women imprisoned within the cold metal walls. The discovery had left him shaken, but his resolve to uncover the truth and find a way to help had only strengthened. The flickering lights overhead cast long, wavering shadows that danced along the walls, giving the entire place an unsettling, ghostly quality. As Robert made his way deeper into the facility, he noticed the architecture was unnervingly uniform. The corridors were sterile and monotonous, with no indication of what lay behind the unmarked doors lining them. It was as if the facility had been designed to erase individuality, to suppress any semblance of life within its confines. Robert's heart pounded in his chest as he approached a door at the end of the hallway. Unlike the others, this one was slightly ajar, and a soft, eerie glow seeped through the crack. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open, revealing a large, sterile room filled with strange machinery and equipment. The air was cooler here, and the hum of machinery filled the space, creating a low, vibrating buzz that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The room was dominated by a central console, surrounded by a complex array of monitors and control panels. Robert approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the screens. Most displayed streams of incomprehensible data, but one monitor caught his attention. It showed a live feed from various parts of the facility, including the cell block where the alien women were held. Robert's stomach churned as he watched the grainy footage, the women huddled in their cells, expressions of despair etched on their faces. As he examined the console, Robert noticed a series of files labeled with strange symbols. He accessed one of them, revealing a document written in a language he couldn't understand. His suit's translator struggled to parse the text, but a few words stood out, breeding experimentation. And control, the implications were horrifying. This wasn't just a prison, it was a breeding factory, a place where these women were exploited for their reproductive capabilities and subjected to cruel experiments. Anger and disgust welled up inside Robert. The thought of these women being used and abused in such a monstrous way was almost too much to bear. He forced himself to stay focused, knowing he needed more information to understand the full scope of what was happening here. He continued to sift through the files, discovering detailed reports on the women's physiological traits, their abilities, and the methods used to suppress them. One report, in particular, caught his eye. It described a device known as the suppression collar, a cruel piece of technology designed to inhibit the women's powers. The collars emitted a continuous signal that disrupted the neural pathways responsible for their abilities, rendering them helpless and compliant. The reports described the use of these collars as necessary to maintain control and ensure the success of the breeding program. Robert clenched his fists, a deep sense of revulsion coursing through him. The cold, clinical language of the reports did nothing to mask the horror of the situation. He could only imagine the suffering these women had endured, their powers stripped away, their bodies used as mere vessels. The thought made him sick, but it also fueled his determination. He couldn't leave them here, trapped in this nightmare. As he delved deeper into the system, Robert discovered schematics of the facility. The complex was vast, with multiple levels and sections including laboratories, containment cells, and administrative offices. The schematics also revealed the presence of a heavily guarded central chamber, marked as Control Center. If he wanted to disable the facility's systems and free the women, that would be his primary target. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The facility was equipped with advanced security measures, including surveillance cameras, automated turrets, and a contingent of armed guards. Robert's training as a pilot and soldier had prepared him for many things, but infiltrating a heavily fortified facility was a daunting task. He needed a plan, and he needed allies. Robert's thoughts turned to the women he had seen in the cell block. They were the key to his plan. He couldn't do this alone, he needed their help. But first, he had to find a way to disable the suppression collars and free them from their cells. He searched through the files for any information on how the collars operated. After a few tense minutes, he found what he was looking for: a detailed diagram of the control mechanism. The collars were controlled remotely from the control center, But there was also a manual override in each cell block, hidden behind a security panel. A sense of urgency gripped him. He had to act quickly before anyone noticed the breach in the system. He memorized the schematics, then exited the room and made his way back to the cell block. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn and junction a mirror image of the last. The uniformity of the design was disorienting, but Robert's instincts guided him. Finally, he reached the cell block. The air was heavy with a sense of despair, the quiet sobs and murmurs of the women a haunting reminder of their suffering. Robert approached the security panel, concealed behind a metal plate. He pried it open, revealing a series of wires and a small keypad. His hands worked quickly, deftly bypassing the security protocols. With a final, decisive press of a button, the cell doors slid open with a soft hiss. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, one by one, the women stepped out of their cells, their expressions a mix of confusion, fear, and tentative hope. They were a diverse group, each woman unique in appearance and demeanor. Some had vibrant, jewel-toned skin, others had intricate patterns or markings, and a few had physical traits that hinted at otherworldly origins: glowing eyes, elongated limbs, or ethereal wings. Robert stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Robert," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to help you. We need to disable the suppression collars and take down this facility. I know you're scared, but I promise I'll do everything I can to get you out of here." The women exchanged glances, their expressions wary but curious. One of them, a tall woman with silvery skin and striking violet eyes, stepped forward. She spoke in a soft, melodic voice. "My name is Lyra. We were brought here against our will, taken from our homes. The collars. They suppress our powers, keep us weak." She glanced at the others, then back at Robert. "If you can disable them, we can help you." Robert nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "There's a manual override in each cell block. I just need a little time to figure out how to disable the collars without setting off any alarms." Lyra nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "We'll help you, but we need to be quick. The guards patrol the corridors regularly. If they find us out of our cells..." Robert understood the urgency. He quickly explained his plan to the women, outlining the steps they needed to take. He would disable the collars and then, together, they would move towards the control center. Once there, they could shut down the facility's systems and call for help. As Robert worked on disabling the collars, the women kept watch, their eyes sharp and alert. He felt a sense of solidarity, a shared purpose that transcended their differences. These women were survivors, strong and resilient, despite the horrors they had endured. As each collar deactivated, a visible change came over the women. Their postures straightened, their eyes regained a spark of life, and a faint, palpable energy filled the air. With the collars finally disabled, Robert felt a surge of relief. The women gathered around him, their expressions a mix of determination and gratitude. Lyra stepped forward, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, Robert. You've given us a chance." He returned the smile, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "We're not out of this yet. We need to move fast and stay together. Once we reach the control center, we'll have a fighting chance." The group moved swiftly through the corridors, guided by the schematics Robert had memorized. The facility seemed to come alive around them, the hum of machinery growing louder, the lights flickering ominously. Every step felt like a race against time, a desperate bid for freedom. As they approached the control center, the atmosphere grew tense. The hallway was guarded by two heavily armed sentries, their faces obscured by helmets. Robert motioned for the group to stay back, then crept forward, using the shadows as cover. His military training kicked in, every movement precise and calculated. He needed to take the guards out silently and efficiently. With a quick, fluid motion, Robert incapacitated the first guard, his hand over the man's mouth to stifle any noise. The second guard barely had time to react before Robert knocked him unconscious. The women watched, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Robert quickly retrieved the guards' weapons and signaled for the group to follow. They entered the control center, a vast room filled with monitors and control panels. The central console, a massive, glowing structure, dominated the space. Robert approached it cautiously, his eyes scanning the screens. The room was empty, save for a lone figure sitting at the console, his back turned to them. Robert's heart raced as he approached, the figure's identity still a mystery. As he got closer, the figure turned, revealing a gaunt, pale face. The man's eyes were cold and calculating, a hint of recognition flickering in them as he saw Robert. He smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "Ah, the heroic intruder," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I wondered when you'd show up." Robert's jaw tightened. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" The man chuckled, a hollow sound. "Names are unimportant. What matters is the mission. These women are valuable assets, resources to be utilized for the greater good." Robert felt a surge of anger. "They're not assets, they're people. You're exploiting them, using them for some twisted purpose." The man's smile widened. "You misunderstand. The universe is a harsh place, and survival requires sacrifices. These women possess unique traits, gifts that can be harnessed for the benefit of many. Their suffering is a small price to pay." Robert's hands clenched into fists. He glanced at the women, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and defiance. He knew he had to act fast. Without another word, he lunged at the man, pinning him to the ground. The women moved quickly, disabling the console and accessing the facility's systems. As the man struggled beneath him, Robert felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The tables had turned, and now they had the power to end this nightmare. The women worked efficiently, shutting down the facility's security systems and disabling the suppression collars. The lights flickered, then dimmed, signaling the facility's imminent shutdown. Robert released the man, who lay on the ground, gasping for breath. He turned to the women who had gathered around the console. Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, her expression focused and determined. Finally, she looked up, a triumphant smile on her face. "It's done," she said. "The facility is offline, the collars are disabled, and the guards are locked out." A wave of relief washed over Robert. They had done it. The facility's grip on these women was broken, and their path to freedom was clear. But as they stood there, the reality of their situation set in. They were still stranded on a hostile planet, with limited resources and no way to communicate with the outside world. Robert looked at the women, their faces lit with a mix of hope and uncertainty. He knew their journey was far from over. They had taken the first step towards freedom, but there was still a long road ahead. Together, they would have to find a way off this planet, expose the horrors of the facility, and seek justice for the crimes committed against them. As the group gathered their bearings, Robert felt a sense of purpose and resolve. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by their shared struggle. And as they prepared to leave the facility behind, Robert knew one thing for certain: they would not rest until they had found a way to bring this injustice to light and ensure that such horrors would never be repeated. With a final glance at the now darkened control center, Robert led the women out of the facility and into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The descent into darkness had brought them together, and now, together, they would rise above it. The air outside the facility was cold and sharp, a stark reminder of the inhospitable environment they now faced. As Robert and the women emerged from the darkened interior, the harsh landscape of the planet stretched out before them, desolate and unyielding. The sky was a muted gray, casting a pallor over the rocky terrain. The group huddled together, their breaths visible in the frigid air, each person feeling the weight of their newfound freedom alongside the daunting reality of their situation. Lyra, with her striking violet eyes, stood at Robert's side, surveying the barren landscape. The other women, diverse in appearance and demeanor, gathered around, their expressions a mix of relief and anxiety. They had escaped the immediate horrors of the facility, but they were far from safe. The facility's overseers and the syndicate they served would undoubtedly seek to recapture them. Robert knew they had to act quickly, but they also needed a plan. The first priority was finding shelter and securing a means of communication. The facility's power grid and systems had been disabled, but there might still be a way to send a distress signal. Robert motioned for the group to follow him, and they began their trek across the rocky landscape, the facility looming behind them like a dark specter. The ground was uneven and treacherous, forcing them to move cautiously. The oppressive silence of the planet was broken only by the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional gust of wind. As they walked, Robert noticed the women's physical states. Many of them were weak and malnourished, their bodies showing signs of the harsh treatments they had endured. His heart ached for them, but there was little time for sympathy. They needed to find safety and supplies. The group continued in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the weight of their collective trauma palpable. After some time, they came upon a cluster of rocky outcroppings, forming a natural shelter against the biting wind. It was not much, but it offered some protection. They settled down, the women huddling together for warmth. Robert scanned the horizon, his mind racing with possibilities. They were on an uncharted planet with no apparent resources and no way to contact the outside world. Yet, the determination in the women's eyes gave him hope. They had survived the facility, they could survive this. Lyra approached him, her expression serious. "Robert, we need to talk about what we found in the facility. The reports, the experiments. There's more to this than just a breeding factory." Robert nodded, recalling the unsettling documents he had seen. The breeding and experimentation were heinous enough, but there were hints of something even darker, a larger conspiracy that extended beyond this one facility. "I know. The reports mentioned a syndicate, but we need more information. We need to understand the full extent of their operations and expose them." One of the other women, a slender figure with luminous, silver hair and pale blue skin, stepped forward. "I'm Yara," she introduced herself, her voice soft but steady. "Before I was taken, I was a scientist. I worked on decoding ancient languages and symbols. I noticed some of the markings in the facility's control center. They're not just a language. They're a code, a way to hide information." Robert listened intently, intrigued. Yara continued, "If we can access those files again, I might be able to decode them. They could contain information about the syndicate's operations, maybe even their headquarters. But we need to be careful. If the syndicate finds out we're onto them, they'll stop at nothing to silence us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. The idea of going back into the facility was daunting, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. Robert knew it was a risk, but it was one they had to take. "All right," he said, looking around at the women. "We'll go back in, but we need to be smart about it. We'll gather as much information as we can and get out quickly." The women nodded, their expressions resolute. Despite their fear, there was a collective sense of purpose. They were not just fighting for their freedom but for justice in the hope of stopping the syndicate from inflicting similar suffering on others. With the plan set, Robert led the group back toward the facility, their steps filled with determination. As they approached the facility's entrance, the air grew colder, the shadows longer. The once bustling complex now stood silent, an abandoned relic of its former purpose. Robert cautiously led the way, his senses on high alert. They re-entered the facility, moving quietly through the darkened halls. The silence was unsettling, amplifying every sound, every creak of the metal underfoot. They reached the control center without incident, and Yara immediately set to work. Her hands flew over the console, bypassing the disabled systems and accessing the hidden files. The others stood guard, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. The tension was palpable, every moment stretched taut with anticipation. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, Yara let out a triumphant sound. "I've got it," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "The files, there's a lot here, but I managed to decrypt some of the more critical information. The syndicate isn't just running breeding factories. They're involved in a galaxy-wide operation, trafficking beings with unique abilities. They use the factories to breed new generations and experiment on them to enhance their powers." The revelation hit them like a tidal wave. The scale of the syndicate's operations was staggering. It wasn't just about exploitation, it was about creating a network of superpowered individuals, likely for nefarious purposes. Robert's mind reeled at the implications. This was beyond anything they had imagined. Yara continued, her voice hushed with urgency. "There's more. The syndicate has a central command hub, located in a remote sector of the galaxy. It's heavily guarded, and they use it to coordinate their operations and transport their victims. If we can get there, we might be able to shut down their entire network." The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation settled over them. They had stumbled upon a vast conspiracy, a dark underworld hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The weight of their discovery was immense, but so was the opportunity to bring it all crashing down. Robert felt a surge of determination. They had the chance to do something truly heroic, to strike a blow against a powerful and malevolent force. But they couldn't do it alone. They needed allies, resources, and a plan. Robert looked at the women, each of them strong and resolute despite their recent ordeals. They had been victims, but now they were ready to be warriors. He knew they could count on each other, but they needed more than just their group. "We need to get this information to someone who can help," Robert said, his voice firm. "We can't take down the syndicate on our own. We need to expose them and gather allies. But first, we need to find a way off this planet." As they discussed their next steps, a sudden noise echoed through the facility, a distant rumble, growing louder. The group tensed, their eyes darting around the room. Robert quickly realized what it was: reinforcements. The syndicate had likely been alerted to their presence, and now they were sending in troops to secure the facility and recapture the women. "We need to move," now Robert said urgently. "They're coming for us. We can't let them catch us here." Yara quickly downloaded the decrypted files onto a portable device, and the group hurried out of the control center. They moved swiftly through the corridors, the urgency of their situation spurring them on. As they neared the facility's exit, the rumble grew louder, accompanied by the distinct sound of engines. Robert's heart raced. They were running out of time. The group burst out of the facility, the cold air hitting them like a wall. In the distance, they could see the source of the noise: a convoy of vehicles, sleek and ominous, speeding towards them across the rocky landscape. The syndicate's forces were close, too close. They needed to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Robert scanned the area desperately, searching for any possible means of escape. His eyes landed on a small, battered shuttle, half buried in the rocky terrain. It looked ancient and barely functional, but it was their only hope. He pointed it out to the group. "There. It's our only chance." The women followed him as they sprinted towards the shuttle, their footsteps echoing in the cold, desolate air. The convoy was closing in, the vehicles kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Robert reached the shuttle first, prying open the hatch and ushering the women inside. The interior was cramped and dusty, but it seemed intact. Robert hurried to the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls. The systems flickered to life, sputtering and groaning as they powered up. The shuttle was ancient, a relic from a bygone era, but it seemed functional enough. He initiated the launch sequence, praying that the engines would hold. The shuttle rumbled and shook, the engines struggling to ignite. Robert glanced out the viewport, the convoy just meters away. The syndicate's forces had arrived, and they were armed. He could see the figures disembarking, weapons at the ready. There was no time left. With a final, desperate effort, Robert slammed his hand down on the ignition. The engines roared to life, the shuttle lurching forward. The group held on tight as the shuttle lifted off, the ground falling away beneath them. The convoy faded into the distance, the figures growing smaller and smaller. As they ascended into the sky, Robert felt a surge of relief. They had escaped, but just barely. The syndicate was now aware of their actions, and they would stop at nothing to hunt them down. The group was safe for now, but the real challenge was just beginning. They had the information, the evidence of the syndicate's crimes, but they were still stranded in the middle of nowhere, with limited resources and no clear destination. As the shuttle broke through the planet's atmosphere and into the cold vacuum of space, Robert turned to the group, his. The shuttle rattled and groaned as it ascended through the planet's thin atmosphere, the vibrations reverberating through the cramped cabin. The interior lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the worn metal walls. Robert's hands were steady on the controls, his eyes focused on the data streaming across the console. The shuttle was a relic, an outdated model that had likely been abandoned long ago. Its systems were barely functional, and the fuel reserves were worryingly low. Yet, it was their only hope of escape. The women sat behind him, their faces a mixture of relief and anxiety. The rush of their escape still lingered, an adrenaline-fueled haze that had yet to dissipate. Lyra, with her striking violet eyes, leaned forward, her expression a mask of determination. "What's our status?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Robert glanced at the display, the readings fluctuating wildly. "We've cleared the atmosphere," he replied, his tone measured. "But this shuttle is in bad shape. We're low on fuel, and the navigation systems are outdated. We need to find a safe place to land and regroup." Yara, the silver-haired scientist, nodded thoughtfully. "The shuttle systems are ancient, but they should still have basic star charts. We need to find a nearby system, preferably uninhabited, where we can hide and figure out our next move." Robert tapped into the shuttle's navigation system, a rudimentary interface that crackled with static. He manually scrolled through the star charts, searching for a viable destination. The options were limited. Most nearby systems were either uncharted or known to be hostile. But then he found a small, uninhabited moon orbiting a gas giant in a nearby star system. It was remote, with no known settlements or significant resources. The perfect place to lay low. "There's a moon in the Altria system," Robert announced, setting the course. "It's uninhabited and off the radar. We should be able to make it with the fuel we have left." The women nodded in agreement, their expressions grim but resolute. The shuttle's engines hummed as Robert engaged the autopilot, setting them on a course for the Altria system. He leaned back in his seat, finally allowing himself a moment to breathe. The events of the past hours had been a whirlwind, a frantic scramble for survival. But now, in the relative safety of space, he could feel the weight of their situation settling in. They had uncovered a vast, dark conspiracy, an intergalactic syndicate exploiting beings with unique abilities. The implications were staggering, and the threat was immense. They had valuable information, evidence that could expose the syndicate's crimes, but they were alone, isolated, and vulnerable. The shuttle's limited capabilities meant they couldn't travel far or communicate with the outside world. Their options were limited, and the clock was ticking. As the shuttle drifted through the cold expanse of space, Robert turned to the group. "We need a plan," he said, his voice steady but serious. "We've escaped the facility, but we're not out of danger yet. The syndicate will come after us, and we can't stay on the run forever. We need to figure out our next move and how to use the information we have." Lyra nodded, her gaze focused. "We need to find a way to transmit the data to someone who can help. The syndicate is powerful, but there must be organizations or individuals out there who would want to take them down." Yara chimed in, her tone thoughtful. "We need to be strategic. The syndicate likely has deep connections and resources. If we expose them recklessly, they could bury the evidence and retaliate against us. We need allies, people who can protect us and ensure the truth gets out." A silence settled over the group as they considered their options. The reality was grim. They were up against a powerful enemy with far-reaching influence. But they also had something invaluable: the truth. Robert knew they needed to be smart, to think several steps ahead if they wanted to survive and make a difference. As the shuttle continued its journey, Robert's mind raced with possibilities. They needed to find a secure location, somewhere they could safely transmit the data and plan their next move. The Altria moon was a temporary refuge, but they couldn't stay there indefinitely. They needed to think beyond survival. They needed to strike back. After what felt like hours, the shuttle finally entered the Altria system. The gas giant loomed large on the view screen, a swirling mass of vibrant colors. Its moons orbited serenely, small and inconspicuous. Robert guided the shuttle towards the designated moon, a barren, rocky sphere bathed in the gas giant's faint glow. The landing was rough, the shuttle's engines straining as it touched down on the uneven surface. The craft shuddered to a halt, and the engines powered down with a final, exhausted sigh. The group disembarked, stepping onto the moon's rocky terrain. The air was thin, the gravity weak, but it was a safe haven at least for now. They set up a makeshift camp near the shuttle, using what little supplies they had. The cold was biting, the atmosphere harsh, but they were free. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they could breathe without the shadow of the facility looming over them. As they settled in, Robert gathered the group around. "We need to assess our resources and capabilities," he began, his voice steady. "Our priority is to secure communication with the outside world. We need to find someone who can help us take down the syndicate and protect us from their reach." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "We have the data, but we need to transmit it securely. The syndicate likely monitors most major communication channels. We need a secure line, something off the grid." Yara added, "The shuttle systems are basic, but they might have an old distress beacon. If we can modify it, we could send a message to a specific location or individual. It's a long shot, but it might work." Robert considered their options. The situation was precarious, but they had to take risks. The syndicate's reach was vast, but they couldn't control everything. There had to be someone out there willing to help, someone they could trust. He thought back to his past missions, the contacts and allies he had made along the way. There were people who owed him favors, people who had fought against corruption and injustice. but reaching them would be a challenge. As they discussed their options, a sudden realization struck Robert. The data Yara had decrypted the syndicate's operations, their trafficking network. It was all too detailed, too precise. It wasn't just information, it was a roadmap, a guide to their entire operation. And if they had that, they might also have the means to dismantle it. "We have a unique opportunity here," Robert said, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. "We don't just have evidence of their crimes, we have a chance to hit them where it hurts. If we can find their central hub, we could expose them and cripple their operations. But we'll need help, and we'll need to be careful." The group listened intently, their expressions a mix of determination and concern. The risks were enormous, but so were the potential rewards. They had escaped the facility, but the battle was far from over. They were fighting against a shadowy enemy, an enemy that thrived on secrecy and fear. But they had something powerful on their side: the truth. As the group continued to plan, Robert felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just survivors, they were rebels, warriors fighting against a dark and oppressive force. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and challenges. But they were united, bound by their shared experience and their determination to see justice served. The moon's cold, barren landscape stretched out around them, a stark contrast to the warmth and camaraderie of their group. They had faced darkness and emerged stronger, and now they stood at the precipice of a new journey. A journey that would take them into the heart of the syndicate's operations, into the very core of the conspiracy that sought to exploit and destroy. As they prepared for the challenges ahead, Robert knew they couldn't afford to fail. The stakes were too high, the cost of failure too great. They were fighting for themselves, for the countless others who had suffered at the hands of the syndicate, and for the hope of a better, freer galaxy. With the plan set and their resolve steeled, the group settled in for the night, the cold air filled with the promise of a new dawn. They were ready to face whatever came next, ready to fight for justice and freedom. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Robert felt a quiet confidence settle over him. They had a long road ahead, but they were not alone. Together, they would rise above the darkness and light the way for others. In the cold, silent night of the Ultria moon, the group found solace in each other's presence, their hearts and minds united by a common purpose. They had escaped the shadows, but their fight had only just begun. And with the truth as their weapon, they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. The cold, barren landscape of the Ultria moon seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, a stark expanse of gray and white under the dim light of the distant gas giant. The harsh conditions and lack of atmosphere made it a desolate place, yet for Robert and the women, it was a sanctuary, temporary but precious. The group huddled together near the shuttle, a small fire crackling at their center, providing a semblance of warmth against the biting cold. They had managed to scavenge enough supplies from the shuttle's emergency kits to sustain themselves, but their situation remained precarious. As the days passed, the initial adrenaline of their escape began to wane, giving way to a deeper understanding of their reality. They were marooned on an inhospitable moon, with limited resources and no immediate means of contacting the outside world. The realization of their isolation brought a sobering clarity, but it also fostered a sense of unity among them. Strangers thrown together by circumstance, they found themselves bound by a shared purpose and a growing camaraderie. Robert took the opportunity to get to know the women better. Each one had a story, a past filled with both light and shadow. Their resilience in the face of adversity was a testament to their strength, and Robert felt a deep admiration for them. They had been victims of a cruel and exploitative system, yet they carried themselves with grace and determination. He knew that their bond would be crucial in the days to come as they prepared to take on the syndicate. One evening, as they gathered around the fire, Lyra began to speak. Her voice, soft and melodic, carried a weight of experience and wisdom. "I was taken from my home planet of Selvora," she said, her violet eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "We are a peaceful people, known for our psionic abilities. The syndicate saw us as valuable assets, a resource to be exploited. They captured me and others, using us for our powers and abilities." The group listened in rapt silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Lyra continued, her expression distant. "They suppressed our abilities with those collars, but they couldn't suppress our spirits. We communicated telepathically, sharing our stories, our hopes, and our fears. It was our way of resisting, of holding on to our identities in a place that sought to erase them." Yara, the silver-haired scientist, nodded. "I come from a world rich in knowledge and technology," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of pride. "The Syndicate coveted our advancements, our understanding of ancient technologies. They captured me and my colleagues, hoping to extract our knowledge for their own gain. They forced us to work on their projects, to decipher ancient scripts and unlock hidden powers." Robert felt a pang of anger and sorrow as he listened to their stories. The Syndicate's cruelty knew no bounds, exploiting the unique traits of each species for their own nefarious purposes. Yet, despite the horrors they had faced, these women remained strong, their spirits unbroken. It was a testament to the resilience of life, the indomitable will to survive and resist. As the night wore on, more stories were shared. Each woman had a unique background, a different culture and history. Some came from lush, vibrant worlds filled with life and beauty, while others hailed from harsh, unforgiving planets where survival was a daily struggle. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their shared experience of captivity and exploitation. The bonds they formed in the facility, and now on this moon, grew stronger with each passing day. Robert shared his own story, telling them about his life as a pilot and explorer. He spoke of the countless missions he had undertaken, the distant worlds he had visited, and the people he had met along the way. He told them about the thrill of discovery, the beauty of the cosmos, and the sense of purpose he found in exploration. But he also spoke of the darker side of his work, the corruption, the greed, and the exploitation he had witnessed. He had seen firsthand the lengths to which powerful entities would go to maintain control and profit at the expense of others. The group listened intently, their expressions thoughtful. They understood all too well the darker side of the galaxy, having lived through it themselves. But there was also a sense of hope, a belief that they could make a difference. Together, they had the power to challenge the Syndicate, to expose their crimes and bring justice to the countless victims. In the days that followed, the group continued to bond and grow closer. They shared their knowledge and skills, teaching each other about their respective cultures and abilities. Lyra demonstrated her psionic powers, a form of telepathy that allowed her to communicate without words. She explained that her people used these abilities to connect with one another on a deeper level, fostering a sense of unity and understanding. Yara shared her knowledge of ancient technologies, explaining the intricacies of the devices they had encountered in the facility. She showed them how to decipher ancient symbols and scripts, a skill that could prove invaluable in their mission. The other women, too, shared their unique talents and experiences, each contributing to the group's growing pool of knowledge and skills. As they trained and prepared, Robert noticed a transformation in the women. The fear and uncertainty that had marked their initial escape were gradually replaced with confidence and determination. They were no longer just survivors, they were warriors, ready to fight for their freedom and the freedom of others. Robert felt a deep sense of pride and admiration for them. They had faced unimaginable horrors, yet they stood tall, unbroken and resolute. One day, as they gathered around the shuttle's rudimentary communication console, Yara announced that she had found a way to modify the distress beacon. "It's not perfect," she said, her hands deftly working on the console, "but it should allow us to send a message to a specific location. We just need to decide where to send it." The group fell silent, considering their options. They needed to contact someone they could trust, someone with the power and resources to help them. Robert thought back to his past missions, the people he had met along the way. There were a few individuals who came to mind, people who had fought against corruption and injustice, who had stood up for the oppressed. He knew they needed to choose carefully. The Syndicate's reach was vast, and they couldn't afford to expose themselves to the wrong people. Finally, Robert spoke. "I have a contact in the Galactic Free Alliance," he said, his voice steady. "They're a group dedicated to fighting corruption and protecting the rights of all sentient beings. They're not as powerful as the Syndicate, but they have a network of allies and resources. If we can get the information to them, they might be able to help us." The women nodded in agreement. The Galactic Free Alliance was a beacon of hope for many in the galaxy, a symbol of resistance against tyranny and exploitation. They had a reputation for standing up to powerful entities and advocating for justice. If anyone could help them, it would be the Alliance. Yara finished her work on the console and nodded to Robert. "The beacon is ready," she said. "We can send a message to your contact, but we'll need to be quick. The Syndicate might pick up the signal and trace it back to us." Robert nodded, understanding the urgency. He quickly composed a message, detailing their situation and the evidence they had gathered against the syndicate. He included a summary of the decrypted data and the location of the syndicate's central hub. The message was brief but detailed, designed to convey the gravity of the situation without revealing too much. He knew they couldn't afford to give away their location or identities, not until they were sure they could trust the recipient. With the message prepared, Yara activated the beacon. The console hummed softly, a faint light blinking on the display. They watched in tense silence as the message was transmitted, the signal carrying their hopes and fears across the vast expanse of space. It was a gamble, a leap of faith, but it was their best chance. As the transmission ended, the group let out a collective sigh of relief. The message was sent, and all they could do now was wait. The uncertainty weighed heavily on them, the knowledge that the syndicate could be closing in at any moment. But they found solace in each other's presence, in the bonds of friendship and trust they had forged. They had come a long way, and they knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. As the night fell, the group gathered around the fire once more, their spirits buoyed by a sense of camaraderie. They shared stories and laughter, finding moments of joy amidst the uncertainty. It was a reminder of their humanity, of the resilience of the spirit even in the darkest of times. They were not just victims or fugitives, they were survivors, fighters, and friends. The cold air of the Altria moon seemed less harsh, the barren landscape less desolate. They had found warmth in each other's company, a light that burned brightly against the encroaching darkness. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and dangers. But they were ready to face it, armed with the truth and the bonds they had forged. In the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled above, Robert felt a deep sense of peace. They were on a journey, a quest for justice and freedom. And with the strength of their friendship and the power of their resolve, they knew they could overcome any obstacle. They were a team, united by a common purpose, and together, they would rise above the darkness and fight for a brighter future. As the fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow on their faces, the group sat together, their hearts and minds united. They were ready for whatever came next, ready to face the challenges and dangers that lay ahead. And with their bond of friendship, they knew they could weather any storm, overcome any adversity, and achieve the impossible. They were not just survivors, they were warriors, ready to fight for justice and a better world. And with the dawn of a new day, they would continue their journey, undeterred and unbroken, their spirits burning bright in the darkness. The Altria moon's perpetual twilight gave way to an artificial dawn as the group prepared for the next phase of their plan. The cold, barren landscape seemed to stretch endlessly, an unyielding reminder of their isolation. Yet amidst the desolation, a quiet resolve settled over them. The message had been sent, and now they awaited a response. But waiting wasn't an option. They needed to act, to take the fight to the syndicate before it was too late. Robert stood at the shuttle's makeshift command center, reviewing the decrypted data Yara had retrieved from the facility. The information was comprehensive, detailing not only the syndicate's operations but also their weaknesses. The central hub, located in a remote sector, was the nerve center of their operations. It was heavily fortified, but the data revealed a vulnerability: a series of underground conduits used for transporting supplies and personnel. If they could infiltrate these conduits, they could sabotage the hub's systems from within, potentially crippling the entire network. As Robert outlined the plan to the group, a mix of determination and apprehension filled the air. The task ahead was daunting, and the risks were immense, but they had come too far to turn back now. They knew the syndicate would be relentless in hunting them down, especially after the message they had sent. Their only option was to strike first and strike hard. Lyra stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We've faced worse," she said, her voice steady. "We've survived the facility and escaped their clutches. We can do this. We have to do this." The others nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting the same determination. They had become a close-knit unit, bound by their shared ordeal and a common purpose. Each of them had a role to play in the mission, and they were ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. As they prepared to depart, Robert checked the shuttle systems one last time. The vessel was old and barely functional, but it would have to do. He double-checked the coordinates for the syndicate's hub and set the autopilot. The journey would be perilous, but they had no choice. The hub was their only chance to strike a decisive blow against the Syndicate and potentially cripple their operations. The shuttle lifted off from the moon's surface, the engines sputtering and groaning. The group watched as the barren landscape fell away beneath them, the harsh environment giving way to the cold expanse of space. The tension was palpable, each moment filled with anticipation and uncertainty. They knew the stakes were high, and the consequences of failure were dire. But they were united in their resolve, determined to see the mission through. The journey to the hub was uneventful, the shuttle navigating through the vastness of space with a quiet efficiency. The group used the time to review the plan, going over every detail and contingency. They knew the hub would be heavily guarded, with security measures in place to prevent unauthorized access. But they also knew that the element of surprise was on their side. The Syndicate would not expect a direct attack, especially from a group of fugitives. As they approached the hub, the shuttle's sensors picked up a faint energy signature. The hub was hidden within a dense asteroid field, a natural barrier that provided additional protection. The group maneuvered the shuttle carefully, navigating through the field with precision. The asteroids loomed large, their jagged surfaces casting long shadows in the dim light of the distant stars. It was a treacherous path, but they pressed on, their determination unwavering. Finally, the hub came into view. It was a massive structure, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules and towers. The exterior was sleek and imposing, a stark contrast to the rugged asteroids surrounding it. The hub's defensive systems were visible, a network of automated turrets and sensor arrays designed to detect and neutralize any threat. It was a formidable fortress, but they had a plan. Robert guided the shuttle towards the coordinates they had obtained from the data. The conduits were located beneath the hub, accessible only through a hidden entry point. The entry was small and well-concealed, designed to blend in with the surrounding terrain. It was a calculated risk, but they had no other choice. They needed to get inside and disable the hub's systems from within. The shuttle landed softly on a small asteroid near the entry point. The group disembarked, their movements cautious and deliberate. The air was thin and the gravity was weak, but they had prepared for this. They donned their spacesuits, the suit systems activating with a soft hum. The suits were equipped with stealth technology, designed to mask their presence from the hub's sensors. It was their best chance of going undetected. Robert led the way, his eyes scanning the terrain for any signs of movement. The others followed, their steps silent and purposeful. They reached the entry point without incident, the small hatch blending seamlessly with the asteroid's surface. Robert activated the entry mechanism, the hatch sliding open with a faint hiss. They entered the conduit, the narrow passageway stretching out before them. The conduit was dark and cold, the walls lined with pipes and cables. It was a stark contrast to the sleek exterior of the hub, a hidden underbelly that spoke of the Syndicate's clandestine operations. The group moved cautiously, their senses on high alert. They knew that the hub's defenses were sophisticated, and any misstep could alert the guards to their presence. As they made their way deeper into the conduit, the air grew colder, the passage narrowing. The group stayed close, their movements synchronized. They reached a junction, the conduit branching off into multiple paths. Robert checked the data, confirming their route. They needed to reach the central control room, the nerve center of the hub's operations. From there, they could disable the hub's systems and initiate the sabotage. The group pressed on, their progress slow but steady. They encountered several security checkpoints, each one more elaborate than the last, but Yara's knowledge of the Syndicate's technology proved invaluable. She bypassed the security measures with ease, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced precision. The group's confidence grew with each success, their determination bolstered by their progress. Finally, they reached the central control room. The door was heavily reinforced, a final barrier protecting the hub's core systems. Robert took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. This was at the moment of truth. He motioned for the group to take their positions, each person ready for the final push. Yara approached the door, her expression focused. She connected her datapad to the control panel, her eyes scanning the display. The door's security protocols were complex, but she was confident in her abilities. She began the decryption process, the seconds ticking by in agonizing silence. Suddenly, the door slid open with a soft click. The group tensed, their eyes darting to the control room beyond. It was a large, circular chamber, filled with monitors and control panels. The room was empty, the only sound the faint hum of machinery. The group entered cautiously, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. Robert approached the central console, his hands steady on the controls. He activated the systems, the monitors flickering to life. The data they had obtained from the facility was accurate. This was the hub's nerve center, the control point for their entire operation. Robert quickly accessed the hub's systems, his fingers flying over the controls. As he worked, the others took up defensive positions, their eyes on the entrances to the room. They knew that their presence wouldn't go unnoticed for long. The hub's security systems were sophisticated, and it was only a matter of time before the guards realized something was amiss. But they were prepared, ready to face whatever came their way. Robert worked quickly, bypassing the hub's security protocols and accessing the core systems. He disabled the hub's defenses, shutting down the turrets and sensor arrays. He then initiated a data transfer, sending the hub's records to a secure location. It was a risky move, but they needed the evidence to expose the syndicate's crimes. As the data transfer completed, a sudden alarm blared through the room. The group tensed, their eyes darting to the monitors. The hub's security systems had detected the breach, and the guards were on their way. They had limited time to complete their mission and escape. Robert initiated the final phase of the planned sabotage. He accessed the hub's power grid, overloading the systems and setting a countdown for a controlled explosion. The explosion would cripple the hub, disrupting their operations and buying the group enough time to escape. It was a dangerous gambit, but it was their only option. The countdown began, the seconds ticking away with a relentless urgency. The group gathered at the room's exits, their eyes scanning the corridors for any signs of movement. The tension was palpable, each moment filled with anticipation and fear. Suddenly, the door to the control room burst open, a group of armed guards pouring in. The group reacted instantly, engaging the guards with precision and skill. Robert and Lyra took up defensive positions, their blasters firing with deadly accuracy. Yara and the others provided cover, their movements coordinated and efficient. The room erupted in chaos, the sound of blaster fire and shouting filling the air. The group fought with a fierce determination, their resolve unshaken. They had come too far to fail now, and they were determined to see the mission through. As the battle raged on, the countdown continued, the seconds ticking away. The group held their ground, their movements a blur of motion and energy. The guards were relentless, but the group fought back with equal ferocity. They were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of surprise and determination. Finally, the countdown reached 0. The room was bathed in a blinding light as the explosion rocked the hub. The group braced themselves, the shockwaves sending them sprawling. The room shook, the walls cracking and the monitors sparking. The hub's systems shut down, the lights flickering and then going dark. The group scrambled to their feet, the room filled with smoke and debris. The explosion had crippled the hub, but they knew they had to move quickly. The guards were still a threat, and they needed to escape before the hub's systems could recover. Robert led the way, the group moving swiftly through the corridors. The hub was in chaos, the guards disoriented and the systems offline. The group moved with purpose, their steps sure and steady. They reached the conduit, their escape route still intact. As they made their way through the conduit, the group felt a surge of relief. They had succeeded in their mission, crippling the hub and securing the evidence they needed. But they knew their journey was far from over. The syndicate would not take this lightly, and they would stop at nothing to hunt them down. The group reached the shuttle, their breaths heavy and their bodies tired. They boarded quickly, the engines sputtering to life. The shuttle lifted off, the hub's damaged exterior fading into the distance. They had escaped, but the road ahead was still uncertain. As the shuttle sped away from the hub, the group took a moment to catch their breath. They had faced incredible odds and emerged victorious, but they knew the fight was far from over. The syndicate would retaliate, and they needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Robert looked around at the group, his heart filled with pride and admiration. They had become a team, a family bound by their shared struggle and their determination to fight for justice. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their spirits unbroken. As the shuttle continued its journey, the group felt a sense of calm settle over them. They had struck a blow against the Syndicate, a small but significant victory. They knew there would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face. But they were ready, united in their cause and determined to see it through. In the cold expanse of space, the group found solace in each other's presence. They were not alone in their fight, and they knew they had the strength to overcome any obstacle. They had taken a stand against tyranny and injustice, and they would continue to fight for a better future. As the stars twinkled in the distance, the group looked forward with hope and determination. They had faced incredible odds and emerged victorious, and they knew they would continue to fight for what was right. They were a team, united in their cause, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The shuttle coasted through the inky expanse of space, its engines a faint hum against the backdrop of the stars. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. The group had managed to sabotage the Syndicate's hub, dealing a critical blow to their operations. However, they knew the fight was far from over. The consequences of their actions would soon ripple through the galaxy, and the Syndicate would undoubtedly retaliate with all their might. As the shuttle drifted towards a secluded asteroid field, a temporary refuge while they planned their next steps, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. Robert sat at the makeshift command center, scanning through the data they had retrieved. The encrypted files were a treasure trove of information detailing the Syndicate's expansive network and the full extent of their criminal activities. Yet, amidst the labyrinth of data, one discovery stood out: a collection of heavily encrypted files marked Project Obsidian. The name alone sent a shiver down Robert's spine, evoking a sense of foreboding. Yara, seated next to him, was deep in concentration as she worked to decrypt the files. Her fingers danced over the console, her expression one of intense focus. The rest of the group huddled around, their eyes fixed on the screen. The shuttle's dim interior lighting cast long shadows, heightening the air of suspense. Finally, with a soft beep, the files began to open. The group's collective breath hitched as the contents were revealed. The files detailed a secret project, an insidious plan by the Syndicate to create a new generation of superpowered beings, harnessing their unique abilities for nefarious purposes. The project's scope was vast, encompassing genetic experimentation, cybernetic enhancements, and psychological conditioning. The Syndicate aimed to build an army, a legion of enhanced individuals loyal only to them. These beings, referred to as Obsidian, were intended to serve as both soldiers and enforcers, a means to exert control over the galaxy. Robert's eyes widened in horror as he read further. The project was not merely theoretical, it was already in progress. The Syndicate had established multiple facilities across the galaxy, hidden in remote locations, where they were conducting their experiments. The files contained detailed records of the abducted individuals, their genetic profiles, and the experiments conducted on them. The level of detail was chilling, a stark reminder of the Syndicate's ruthlessness. Lyra's voice broke the silence, her tone laced with anger. They weren't just using us for our abilities, they were creating something far worse. They wanted to turn us into weapons, into tools for their own gain. Her violet eyes flashed with a mixture of fury and sorrow. The others nodded, their expressions mirroring her sentiment. The revelations were a punch to the gut, a harsh reminder of the true extent of the Syndicate's malevolence. Yara continued scrolling through the files, her expression growing graver. The data mentions a central research facility, a Obsidian Forge. It's the main hub for the project, where they oversee all the experiments and enhancements. If we can find it and shut it down, we could put a stop to the project and free those trapped there. The group fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of the situation. The Obsidian Forge was their next target, the key to dismantling Project Obsidian and crippling the Syndicate's power. But it wouldn't be easy. The facility was heavily guarded, and the Syndicate would be on high alert after the sabotage of their previous hub. They needed a plan, and they needed allies. Robert leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples as he pondered their next move. "We can't do this alone," he said, his voice steady but thoughtful. "We need help, and we need to expose what the Syndicate is doing. The data we have is damning, but we need to get it to the right people who can make a difference." Lyra nodded in agreement. "The Galactic Free Alliance," she suggested. "They've been fighting against corruption and tyranny for years. If we can get this information to them, they can help us take down the Syndicate and protect the victims of Project Obsidian." The mention of the Alliance brought a sense of hope. The organization had a reputation for championing justice and opposing oppressive regimes. They were well connected and had the resources to mount a substantial resistance against the syndicate. But reaching them was another challenge. The syndicate's reach was vast, and they would likely have eyes and ears everywhere. As they deliberated, a soft chime interrupted their thoughts. The shuttle's communication system had picked up a signal, a response to the distress beacon they had sent earlier. The group exchanged tense glances, their hearts pounding with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Robert quickly accessed the console, bringing up the message. The screen flickered, displaying a brief text transmission. "This is Captain Alara Korin of the Galactic Free Alliance. We received your message and the data packet. Your information is critical, but the syndicate's influence is strong. We must proceed with caution. Rendezvous at the following coordinates for further instructions. Stay safe. Korin out." A palpable sense of relief washed over the group. The Alliance had received their message and was willing to help, but the caution in Korin's words was clear. The syndicate's influence was widespread, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. The coordinates provided were in a remote sector, far from the syndicate's known territories, a perfect location for a covert meeting. Robert nodded, a sense of purpose settling over him. "All right, let's prepare. We have a lot of ground to cover, and we need to stay under the radar. The syndicate will be looking for us, and we can't afford to be found." The group quickly set to work, preparing the shuttle for the journey. Yara continued to safeguard the decrypted data, ensuring it was securely stored and ready for transfer. Lyra and the others checked their equipment and supplies, making sure they were ready for any situation. There was a quiet determination in their movements, a shared understanding of the stakes involved. As the shuttle entered hyperspace, the group gathered in the main cabin. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light, the familiar sensation of faster-than-light travel washing over them. It was a moment of relative calm, a brief respite from the tension and danger that had defined their journey so far. Robert took the opportunity to address the group, his voice steady but earnest. "We've come a long way, and we've faced incredible odds. But we can't let our guard down. The syndicate will stop at nothing to protect their secrets and maintain their power. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for all the victims of their crimes. We need to stay focused and work together." The group nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. They understood the gravity of the situation and the challenges ahead. They had uncovered a dark and dangerous conspiracy, and now they had a chance to expose it and bring about change. But they couldn't afford any missteps. The syndicate was a formidable enemy, and any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. As the shuttle continued its journey, the group fell into a quiet routine. They checked their equipment, reviewed the data, and discussed potential strategies. There was a sense of camaraderie among them, a bond forged in the crucible of their shared experiences. They had faced danger and adversity together, and they had emerged stronger and more united. Finally, the shuttle exited hyperspace, dropping into the designated coordinates. The rendezvous point was an unassuming asteroid field, a perfect hiding place for a covert meeting. As the shuttle maneuvered through the field, the group kept a close watch on the sensors, looking for any signs of the Alliance's presence or the syndicate's. A soft beep on the console indicated an incoming transmission. Robert quickly answered, the screen displaying a coded message. It was Captain Korin, confirming their arrival and providing instructions for the meeting. The group followed the directions, navigating to a small, hidden docking bay nestled within one of the larger asteroids. The shuttle landed smoothly, the engines powering down with a soft hum. The group disembarked, stepping into the dimly lit docking bay. The air was cold and stale, the walls lined with crates and equipment. As they stood there, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the space. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall woman with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. She wore a dark uniform, the insignia of the Galactic Free Alliance visible on her sleeve. It was Captain Alara Korin, the woman who had responded to their distress beacon. She approached the group, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Welcome," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "We've been monitoring the syndicate's activities for some time, but your information sheds new light on their operations. Project Obsidian is a threat we cannot ignore." Robert stepped forward, extending a hand. "Thank you for meeting us, Captain Korin. We appreciate your help. The Syndicate's reach is vast and their influence is strong, but we have evidence that can expose them and put an end to their operations. Corin nodded, shaking Robert's hand. We're aware of the risks. The Syndicate has eyes and ears everywhere, but we're prepared to fight back. The Alliance has been working to build a coalition of allies, people and groups willing to stand against tyranny and corruption. Your information could be the key to rallying support and bringing the Syndicate to justice. The group exchanged glances, a sense of hope and determination filling the air. They had found an ally in the Alliance, a powerful organization dedicated to justice and freedom. It was a significant step forward, but the road ahead was still fraught with danger. Corin led the group to a small meeting room, where a holographic display illuminated the dark space. She activated the display, bringing up a map of the galaxy. We've identified several key locations associated with the Syndicate's operations, she explained. These are their main hubs, where they conduct their experiments and oversee their criminal activities. The Obsidian Forge is their central research facility, the heart of Project Obsidian. If we can shut it down, we can cripple their operations and free those trapped there. Yara stepped forward, her expression serious. We have detailed data on the Forge's layout and security measures. It's heavily fortified, but there are vulnerabilities we can exploit. We need a coordinated effort, a strike team to infiltrate the facility and disable their systems. Corin nodded, her eyes sharp. The Alliance can provide support, but we need to act quickly. The Syndicate will be on high alert after the sabotage at their hub. We can't afford to waste time. As the group discussed their plan, a sense of urgency filled the room. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. The Obsidian Forge was a symbol of the Syndicate's power, a place where countless lives had been taken and countless more were at risk. Shutting it down would be a significant victory, a blow against the Syndicate's tyranny. The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of purpose. The Alliance would mobilize their forces, coordinating with the group to launch a decisive strike against the Obsidian Forge. It would be a dangerous mission, but it was a mission worth taking. As the group prepared to leave, Corin pulled Robert aside. Her expression was serious, her voice low. I want you to know, Robert, that the Alliance is grateful for your bravery and determination. You've taken on a formidable enemy, and you've done so with honor. But be careful. The Syndicate is ruthless, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Robert nodded, a steely determination in his eyes. We know the risks, Captain. But we're not backing down. We're fighting for justice, for all the victims of the Syndicate's crimes. We won't stop until we've brought them to justice. Corin smiled, a hint of respect in her gaze. Then we'll stand with you. Together, we'll take down the Syndicate and ensure that justice is served. As Robert rejoined the group, a sense of resolve settled over them. They had found allies in the Alliance, and they had a plan to take down the Obsidian Forge. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges and obstacles. But they were ready to face it, united in their cause and determined to see it through. As the shuttle lifted off from the docking bay, the group looked forward with hope and determination. They had uncovered dark secrets and faced incredible odds, but they had also found strength in each other and in their allies. They were not alone in their fight, and they knew they had the power to make a difference. In the cold expanse of space, the group felt a sense of calm and purpose. They had taken a stand against tyranny and injustice, and they would continue to fight for a better future. With the Alliance by their side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were a team, united in their cause, and they were determined to bring the Syndicate to justice and ensure that the dark secrets of Project Obsidian were brought to light. The Galactic Free Alliance's fleet assembled in the shadow of a distant nebula, a hidden staging ground far from the Syndicate's watchful eyes. The nebula's swirling colors, deep blues, vibrant purples, and electric greens, provided an ethereal backdrop, a stark contrast to the tense preparations unfolding within the fleet. The group, now joined by Alliance operatives, stood aboard the command ship, the Resolute. It was a state-of-the-art vessel bristling with weaponry and cloaking technology, a testament to the Alliance's resolve to challenge the Syndicate's tyranny. Robert stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering before him. The Obsidian Forge was highlighted in red, a stark reminder of their target's significance. The facility was nestled within a dense asteroid field, a natural shield that made it nearly impenetrable. But the group had a plan, a carefully orchestrated assault designed to exploit the Forge's few weaknesses. Captain Alara Corin, her presence commanding and confident, addressed the assembled team. "The Obsidian Forge is the Syndicate's heart," she began, her voice clear and resolute. "It's where they conduct their most secretive and heinous experiments. Our objective is simple: infiltrate the facility, disable their systems, and liberate the captives. But make no mistake, the Forge is heavily fortified. This will not be easy." Yara, standing beside Robert, nodded in agreement. She had spent countless hours poring over the decrypted files, mapping out the facility's layout and security protocols. "We've identified key points within the Forge," she explained, pointing to the holographic maps, the main reactor, the security control center, and the research labs. "Our teams will split up and target these areas. Disabling the reactor will cripple their power, taking down their defenses. The control center will give us access to the facility's systems, and the labs, that's where we'll find the captives." The plan was ambitious, a multi-pronged assault designed to overwhelm the Syndicate's defenses and minimize casualties. The Alliance had committed a strike team of elite operatives, seasoned soldiers, and specialists who had fought in countless skirmishes against oppressive regimes. They were experienced, disciplined, and determined. But even with their expertise, the mission carried immense risks. As the final preparations were made, Robert felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was razor-thin. But he also felt a deep sense of resolve. They had come so far, uncovered so many dark secrets, and fought against overwhelming odds. This was their chance to strike a decisive blow to end the Syndicate's reign of terror. The fleet moved into position, the ships gliding silently through the void. The Resolute led the charge, flanked by smaller assault vessels and fighter escorts. The plan hinged on the element of surprise. The Syndicate would not expect a direct assault on the Forge. The Alliance had employed advanced cloaking technology to mask their approach, and the asteroid field provided additional cover. As they neared the Forge, the tension on the command deck was palpable. The facility loomed ahead, a massive structure built into the largest asteroid in the field. Its surface was a maze of gun turrets, sensor arrays, and docking bays. The Syndicate had spared no expense in fortifying their prized research hub. But the Alliance was undeterred. Captain Corin's voice crackled over the intercom. "All units, prepare for assault. We have one chance to do this right. Let's show them what the Alliance is capable of." The order was given, and the fleet sprang into action. The Resolute and the other capital ships unleashed a barrage of electronic countermeasures, jamming the Forge's communications and disrupting their sensors. At the same time, the assault vessels and fighters surged forward, moving with deadly precision. The battle had begun. The Resolute's bridge was a flurry of activity as data streamed in from across the battlefield. Robert and the team watched as the holographic display updated in real time, showing the positions of both friendly and enemy forces. The initial wave of Alliance fighters engaged the Forge's defenses, drawing fire away from the assault teams. The plan was working, but the Syndicate's response was swift and brutal. The Forge's turrets roared to life, spewing torrents of laser fire at the approaching ships. The asteroid field lit up with explosions, the void filled with the flashes of energy weapons. The Alliance fighters weaved through the chaos, their pilots executing daring maneuvers to avoid the onslaught. It was a high-stakes dance of death, and every second counted. As the battle raged outside, the assault teams prepared to breach the Forge's outer defenses. Robert, Lyra, Yara, and a select group of operatives would infiltrate the facility, targeting the reactor and the control center, disable the Forge's power, and take control of the systems. It was a critical mission, and failure was not an option. The assault vessel carrying Robert's team cut through the chaos, dodging debris in an enemy fire. They approached one of the Forge's docking bays, its blast doors sealed shut. Yara hacked into the facility's systems, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The doors groaned open, and the vessel slipped inside, landing with a heavy thud. The team disembarked, their weapons drawn and senses alert. The docking bay was eerily silent, the air thick with tension. They moved quickly, navigating through the labyrinthine corridors of the Forge. The facility's interior was a stark contrast to its fortified exterior, sterile, clinical, and unnervingly quiet. The walls were lined with sleek metal panels, the floors a polished gray. It felt more like a laboratory than a military institution. As they advanced, the team encountered pockets of resistance. Syndicate guards, armed and armored, emerged from the shadows, engaging the intruders with lethal intent. The hallways echoed with the sounds of blaster fire and shouted commands. Robert and the operatives fought with precision, their training and experience evident in every movement. Lyra used her psionic abilities to disorient the guards, her eyes glowing with a faint, ethereal light. Yara provided technical support, hacking into security systems and disabling traps. The group pressed on, their progress marked by skirmishes and brief respites. They reached a junction, the corridor splitting in two directions. Robert turned to the team, his expression grim. "We'll split up here. Lyra, Yara, and I will head to the control center. The rest of you, focus on the reactor. We need to bring their systems down, and we need to do it fast." The team nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They understood the gravity of their mission and the importance of their roles. With a final nod, they parted ways, disappearing into the dimly lit corridors. Robert led Lyra and Yara through a series of winding passages, their path illuminated by the flickering lights above. The control center was located deep within the facility, heavily guarded and fortified. As they approached, the sound of machinery grew louder, the hum of servers and processors filling the air. They reached a large reinforced door, the final barrier between them and their objective. Yara quickly accessed the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. The door's security protocols were complex, but she was prepared. With a soft beep, the door slid open, revealing the control center beyond. It was a vast room, filled with monitors, consoles, and data terminals. The walls were lined with servers, their lights blinking rhythmically. At the center of the room stood a large circular console, the heart of the Forge's systems. The room was not empty. A dozen Syndicate operatives stood ready, their weapons trained on the intruders. The leader, a tall figure clad in sleek, black armor, stepped forward. His face was obscured by a helmet, but his voice was cold and commanding. "You have made a grave mistake coming here," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "The Syndicate will not tolerate interference in our work." Robert tightened his grip on his blaster, his eyes locked on the leader. "We're here to put an end to your work," he retorted, his voice steady. "Project Obsidian ends today." The leader's helmet tilted slightly, as if amused. "You think you can stop us? The Forge is just one facility. Our reach extends far beyond this place. You can't possibly hope to win." Lyra stepped forward, her violet eyes glowing with intensity. "Maybe not today," she said, her voice resonant with power. "But we will bring you down. One way or another, your tyranny ends." With a flick of his wrist, the leader signaled his operatives to attack. The room erupted in chaos, blaster fire and psionic energy crackling through the air. Robert, Lyra, and Yara moved with practiced precision, each of them a blur of motion. Lyra unleashed a wave of psionic energy, disorienting the operatives and throwing them off balance. Robert fired with deadly accuracy, his blaster bolts finding their marks. Yara hacked into the systems, her focus unwavering despite the chaos around. The battle was fierce, each side fighting with relentless determination. The Syndicate operatives were highly trained, their movements coordinated and efficient, but the group had something they lacked: a deep, unbreakable bond forged through shared hardship and a common goal. They fought not just for survival, but for justice, for the countless lives the Syndicate had exploited and destroyed. As the skirmish raged on, Yara accessed the central console, her hands flying over the controls. She worked quickly, bypassing the security protocols and accessing the Forge's core systems. The room's lights flickered as the facility's defenses began to shut down, the monitors displaying a cascade of error messages. The leader, sensing the tide turning, advanced towards Yara, his blaster raised. Robert intercepted him, their blasters clashing in a flurry of motion. The leader was a formidable opponent, his movements swift and precise, but Robert fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his every action driven by the desire to protect his friends and bring justice to the Syndicate's victims. The two combatants clashed in the center of the room, their movements a blur of motion. The leader's blaster fired, narrowly missing Robert's head. Robert retaliated, his own blaster firing point-blank into the leader's chest. The leader staggered, his armor smoking from the impact. He raised his blaster again, but Lyra intervened, her psionic energy slamming into him with a force that sent him crashing to the floor. The room fell silent, the last of the Syndicate operatives subdued. The group stood amidst the wreckage, their breaths heavy, their bodies tense. Yara continued her work at the console, her face set with determination. "I'm initiating the system shutdown," she announced, her voice steady. "This will disable the Forge's power and security systems. We need to move quickly." The group regrouped, their eyes on the central console. The lights flickered again, the room's temperature dropping as the power drained away. The facility's hum grew quieter, the server slowing to a crawl. The shutdown was complete. Robert turned to the others, his expression a mix of relief and resolve. "We've done it," he said, his voice calm. "The Forge is offline, but we need to secure the captives and get out of here. The Syndicate won't sit idly by while we dismantle their operations." The group moved quickly, navigating through the now darkened corridors. The facility was in disarray, the remaining Syndicate operatives retreating in the face of the shutdown. The group reached the research labs, the air thick with a sense of urgency. They entered the main lab, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of life. The lab was a cold, sterile space, filled with containment pods and medical equipment. The walls were lined with monitors displaying vital signs and data. The group approached the pods, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they might find. Inside the pods were the captives, the victims of Project Obsidian. They were a mix of species, their bodies marked by the cruel experiments they had endured. Some had cybernetic implants. Others bore the signs of genetic modifications. They were unconscious, their faces pale and still. Lyra approached one of the pods, her expression softening with empathy. "These poor souls," she murmured, her voice filled with sorrow. "They've been through so much. We need to get them out of here to safety." Yara quickly accessed the lab's systems, initiating the pod release sequence. The pods hissed open, the captives slowly awakening from their induced sleep. The group moved among them, offering words of comfort and reassurance. The captives were disoriented, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. But as they recognized the group as their saviors, a sense of relief washed over them. As the captives were freed, the group worked to escort them to the docking bay. The facility's power was still draining, the emergency lights casting long shadows in the corridors. The air was thick with tension, the knowledge that the Syndicate could retaliate at any moment hanging over them like a dark cloud. They reached the docking bay, the assault vessels waiting to take them to safety. The captives were loaded onto the ships, the group moving with a sense of urgency. The battle outside was still raging, the Alliance forces holding the line against the Syndicate's defenses. The team knew they had to move quickly, their window of escape narrowing with each passing second. As the last of the captives were loaded onto the vessels, Robert turned to the group. "We're not out of this yet," he said, his voice steady. "The Forge is offline, but the Syndicate will be back. We need to get these people to safety and regroup with the Alliance. This isn't..." The group boarded their vessels, the engines roaring to life. The ships lifted off, the docking bay falling away beneath them. They navigated through the asteroid field, the path ahead fraught with danger. The battle outside was still fierce, the void filled with the flashes of energy weapons and the debris of destroyed ships. The Alliance fleet moved to cover their retreat, the capital ships providing a protective screen. The group pushed through the chaos, their vessels weaving through the debris. The void was alive with the sounds of battle, the air thick with tension, but the group was resolute, their focus unyielding. As they broke free of the asteroid field, the group breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had escaped the Forge, the captives were safe, and the Syndicate's prized facility was crippled. It was a victory, a significant blow against the Syndicate's operations, but the group knew that the fight was far from over. The Alliance fleet regrouped, the ships forming a defensive formation. The captives were transferred to medical vessels, their care now in the hands of skilled professionals. The group watched as the medical teams worked, their expressions a mix of relief and sorrow. They had saved these people, but the scars of their captivity would linger. Captain Corin's voice came over the intercom, her tone steady. "The mission was a success. The Forge is offline and the captives are safe. But we need to remain vigilant. The Syndicate will not take this lightly. We have dealt them a significant blow, but they will retaliate. We need to be ready." The group nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They had struck a decisive blow against the Syndicate, but the fight was far from over. The Syndicate was a formidable enemy, and they would not rest until they had reclaimed their lost ground. The group knew they had to stay united to continue their fight for justice and freedom. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Robert looked around at the group. They had come so far, faced so many challenges, and emerged victorious. They had uncovered dark secrets, faced incredible odds, and struck a blow against tyranny. They had become more than just a group of survivors. They had become a family united by their shared struggle and their common goal. As the stars streaked past them, the group felt a sense of calm and resolve. They had fought for justice, for the countless lives affected by the Syndicate's crimes. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, and they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the cold expanse of space, the group looked forward with hope and determination. They had struck a blow against the Syndicate, but their fight was not over. They were ready to continue their battle for justice and freedom, to stand against tyranny and oppression. They were a team united in their cause, and they were determined to see it through to the end. As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the group knew that the final stand had been won, but the war was far from over. They would continue to fight, to uncover the truth, and to bring justice to the victims of the Syndicate's crimes. They were not alone in their struggle, and with the Alliance by their side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were warriors united in their cause, and they would not rest until the galaxy was free from the shadow of the Syndicate. The stars settled into their familiar, twinkling constellations as the fleet exited hyperspace. The Galactic Free Alliance's rendezvous point was a remote system, a quiet sector far from the busy trade routes and inhabited worlds. It was a place chosen for its isolation and security, a safe haven where the fleet could regroup and tend to their wounded. The system's twin suns cast a soft glow over the planets and asteroid belts, a peaceful contrast to the chaos they had left behind at the Obsidian Forge. As the ship settled into orbit around a barren, uninhabited planet, the tension that had gripped the group began to ebb. The assault on the Forge had been a resounding success, but the gravity of their victory was tempered by the sobering reality of the situation. The Syndicate was a wounded beast, dangerous and unpredictable. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. On the command ship Resolute, the atmosphere was a mix of relief and solemnity. The medical bay was a hive of activity, with doctors and nurses tending to the rescued captives. The group Robert, Lyra, Yara, and the other survivors stood on the observation deck, watching as the medical teams worked tirelessly. The captives had been through a harrowing ordeal, and many were in critical condition, but they were alive, and that was a victory in itself. Robert leaned against the glass, his expression pensive. The weight of their actions and the uncertain future loomed over him. They had struck a blow against the Syndicate, but the path ahead was fraught with challenges. The Syndicate's reach was vast, and they would undoubtedly seek retribution. But for now, they had a moment of respite, a chance to reflect on what they had achieved. Lyra stood beside him, her violet eyes soft with empathy as she watched the rescued captives. "We've given them a second chance," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "A chance to heal, to rebuild their lives. It's more than they had before." Robert nodded, his gaze distant. "We've done a good thing," he agreed, his voice steady but thoughtful. "But there's so much more to be done. The Syndicate won't stop, not as long as they have power and influence. We need to keep fighting, to expose their crimes and bring them to justice." Yara joined them, her expression serious. "The data we recovered from the Forge is critical," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "It contains detailed information about the Syndicate's operations, their finances, and their connections. With this, we can cripple their network and rally support against them. But we need to act quickly, before they have a chance to recover." As the group discussed their next steps, Captain Alara Corrin entered the observation deck. She was a commanding presence, her demeanor confident and composed. She approached the group, her eyes reflecting the same mix of relief and resolve. "The Alliance is ready to assist in any way we can," she said, her voice firm. "We've already begun analyzing the data you recovered. It's a treasure trove of evidence, enough to launch a coordinated effort against the Syndicate. But we need to be strategic. The Syndicate has deep ties and powerful allies. We can't afford to make any mistakes." Robert appreciated Corrin's pragmatism. The Alliance's support was invaluable, but they needed to tread carefully. The Syndicate's influence extended far and wide, and a single misstep could have dire consequences. They needed to rally their own allies, build a coalition strong enough to withstand the Syndicate's wrath. The group continued to strategize, mapping out potential targets and allies. The Syndicate's operations were widespread, but they had identified several key figures and locations that could be leveraged to dismantle their network. It was a daunting task, but the group was resolute. They had faced immense challenges and emerged victorious. They could do it again. As the discussions continued, a soft chime echoed through the ship's intercom. It was a signal indicating that a transmission had been received. The group exchanged curious glances, and Corin activated the nearest console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a message from one of the Alliance's intelligence operatives. "This is Agent Alaric of the Galactic Free Alliance Intelligence Division. We've intercepted communications indicating that the Syndicate's leadership is regrouping. They're planning a counterattack, and they're mobilizing their forces. We need to act fast to prevent them from regaining their footing. Stand by for further instructions." The message was brief, but urgent. The Syndicate was already moving to retaliate, and time was of the essence. The group felt a renewed sense of urgency. Their resolve hardening, they had struck a blow against the Syndicate, but now they needed to press their advantage. They couldn't allow the Syndicate to regroup and strike back. Corin turned to the group, her expression serious. "We need to move quickly. The Alliance will support your efforts, but we need to coordinate our actions. We'll launch a coordinated strike against the Syndicate's remaining strongholds, targeting their leaders and key assets. This is our chance to deal a decisive blow and cripple their operations." The group nodded in agreement, their expressions determined. They understood the gravity of the situation and the importance of their actions. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for all the victims of the Syndicate's crimes. They were fighting for justice, for freedom, and for a better future. As the preparations for the next phase of the operation began, the group took a moment to reflect on their journey. They had come a long way, from the dark corridors of the facility where they had been imprisoned to the vast reaches of space. They had faced danger, uncovered dark secrets, and fought against a powerful enemy. They had formed bonds of friendship and trust, and they had found strength in each other. Lyra turned to Robert, her expression thoughtful. "We've been through so much," she said softly, "but I believe we can do this. We've proven that we're stronger together, that we can make a difference. No matter what happens, I'm glad we're fighting this fight together." Robert smiled, a rare moment of warmth amidst the tension. "I feel the same way," he replied. "We've come a long way, and we've faced a lot of challenges. But we've also made a lot of progress. We've shown the galaxy that the Syndicate isn't invincible, that there are people willing to stand up and fight for what's right." Yara joined them, her expression resolute. "We've uncovered the truth and we've exposed the Syndicate's crimes. Now we need to make sure that justice is served. We need to dismantle their network and bring their leaders to justice. It's not going to be easy, but we have to try." The group shared a moment of quiet solidarity, their thoughts and emotions intertwined. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with dangers and challenges, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of the Alliance. Together, they could make a difference. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, the group steeled themselves for the battles to come. They had a mission, a purpose, and a determination to see it through. They were warriors united in their cause, and they would not rest until the Syndicate's power was broken. The stars outside the viewport began to blur as the fleet entered hyperspace, the familiar sensation of faster-than-light travel washing over them. The group felt a sense of calm and focus, their minds clear and their resolve unshaken. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to continue their fight for justice and freedom. In the cold expanse of space, the group found a sense of peace and purpose. They had fought for justice for the countless lives affected by the Syndicate's crimes. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united by their shared struggle and their common goal. They were not alone in their fight, and they knew they had the power to make a difference. As the fleet hurtled through hyperspace, the group looked forward with hope and determination. They had struck a blow against the Syndicate, but their fight was not over. They were ready to continue their battle for justice and freedom, to stand against tyranny and oppression. They were a team, united in their cause, and they were determined to see it through to the end. In the vastness of the galaxy, the group felt a sense of unity and strength. They had fought for what was right, and they would continue to do so. They were warriors, defenders of justice, and they would not rest until the Syndicate was brought to justice. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they were ready to face it together. As the fleet continued its journey, the group felt a deep sense of purpose and resolve. They had uncovered dark secrets. faced incredible odds and struck a blow against tyranny. They had become more than just a group of survivors. They had become a family united by their shared struggle and their common goal. They would continue to fight for justice, for freedom, and for a better future. And with the Alliance by their side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were not alone in their fight, and they knew they had the power to change the galaxy. As the stars streaked past them, the group looked forward with hope and determination. They had come a long way, and they knew that their journey was far from over. But they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their cause and determined to bring justice to the victims of the Syndicate's crimes. They were warriors, united in their fight for justice and freedom, and they would not rest until the galaxy was free from the shadow of the Syndicate.